Hello, guys. Welcome back to the Cocktail Podcast. Starting off a new series here with famous drinks in each country around the planet. Today, we're taking a look at East Asia, so let's get into it. So, the countries we'll be covering in this episode are Mongolia, China, and eastwards. So, starting off with Mongolia, their national alcohol is Arag. It's also known as kumis, and whilst it is the national drink of Mongolia, the Kazakhs and I think it is the Yamaks as well also claim it as their national drink, and it's also quite popular around that kind of area. So it's a alcoholic drink made from fermented milk of a mare, but they add a little bit of salt to it. Um, so you might be thinking, well, why would you want to drink that? But the Mongols kind of see it more as like a healthy drink. It's full of protein, minerals, vitamins, bit of sugar. And as they don't use any kind of modern methods for fermenting or for distilling, it's about 3% ABV, and it's not typically drank to get drunk on. So, whilst horse milk is traditionally used, camel milk can sometimes be used, and that tends to happen a little bit more into the west, so more in Kazakhstan than it does in Mongolia. Um, and that's because Mongolians and horses have a very close relationship. Um, so much so that the horse population in Mongolia is actually greater than the human population. So the great feats of the Mongol Empire, so Attila the Hun, Genghis Khan, they were attributed to their ability at archery, but mainly their ability on archery whilst on horseback, as at the time it offered them much more maneuverability and made them a very, very scary threat. Um, and their relationship with their horses was so close because of that, that if a Mongol warrior died, his horse would be killed and buried with him. So the Mongols and their horses, they go very hand in hand. So they go out, they collect the mare's milk, and once it's gathered, they store it in leather churns. They then add yeast. Then afterwards, they heat the mixture and stir it continuously so it can mend. And they leave it for about 3 to 4 days. Um, Sometimes Westerners have gone over there in order to try it and try and describe what it's like. Um, and the way they've described it is it tastes a little bit like buttermilk and champagne combined, or or it tastes like a strong smoked Gouda cheese. I don't know how buttermilk and champagne or strong smoked Gouda cheese can taste somewhat similar, but there you go. So looking next at China, their national alcohol is Baijiao, which is a colourless liqueur that ranges in strength from about 35 to about 60% ABV. The spirit is distilled from sorghum, which is. I tried to look for a better way for define this, but it's essentially part of the grass family. Um, and different types of baijiu are made from the different types of yeast that are involved with the process. They also call this QU, and this kind of lends itself to a characteristic flavor profile. And they have about four main types of baijiu. So the main four types based on aroma profile, as it's quite a colorless spirit, and is distilled from one thing, is a bit more difficult in order to get massive amounts of difference in terms of flavor. So the main differentiator within Baijiu is their aroma. So the first one, and I apologize for my pronunciation during this episode, is Jiangshang, which has strong flavors that are very similar to soy sauce and like fermented bean pastes. Um, it's meant to be quite an acquired taste, similar to like how people would describe peatiness almost being an acquired taste. It's often served alongside preserved and pickled food, and this is because it has quite a lot of umami flavors within it. So it's got like quite a lot of that meatiness to it. So therefore, it works quite well with those pickled foods because it has a strong flavor, is able to keep up with it. Whereas if you had something a little bit sweeter, a little bit more docile and easy to drink, then when you'd have these really strong flavored pickled foods, then all of that baijiu flavor would be lost. The second one is nongshang. It's a more sweeter version of baijiu with esters in it that almost give like aromas of pineapple, banana, and like some aniseed. And this style is mainly popular around the Sichuan province. The third one is mixshang, a baijiu distilled from rice with less fragrant aromas than the other styles, but results in a more cleaner drinking experience. Then lastly, you've got qinshang, a light, delicate, and dry drink that has more like subtle floral notes with like a light mouthfeel. Within this category, it is then like further divided into Fenshui, originating from Beijing, and Kaoling, originating in Taiwan, which is incidentally their national alcohol as well. Afterwards, we move to Japan. Now, it's mainly known for sake and shoju, although the latter is less well known, as well as Japanese whiskey. However, considering I've covered Japanese whiskey in my beginner whiskey guide, feel free to check that one out if you missed it. I'm just going to cover these two a little bit. Not anything as much in detail as shoju isn't as well known, but I'll give you a little bit of information on it. So sake is also known as Japanese rice wine, and it's produced in a process that's more alike to that of beer than that of traditional wine. Although it's not exactly the same process as beer. It's more similar to beer than it is to wine, but it's also not beer and it's also not wine. So when people say rice wine, not really wine, because it's not produced like wine, but then, yeah, weird process. Anyway, it's also at a higher ABV than wine, being bottled on average about 15 to 22% ABV. Now, when it's drank in Japan, sake is warmed before it's being served, and it's drank usually as part of a special ceremony. As with grape wine, the temperature the sake should be warmed to depends on the style. Now you've got chilled sake, which has slightly more like fruity notes on the nose, and with the taste kind of missing the usual sweet and like savoury notes that come through on it. However, warmed up sake tends to have a little bit more cereal grains on the nose and kind of like more of a full-bodied flavour of sweet, acid, and umami within there. Now they kind of got a general 5 categories on how they break down sake flavors. So they've got, again, pronunciation, apologies, kurami, which they describe as dryness, nigami, which they describe as bitterness, shibumi, which they described as tartness, amami, which they describe as sweetness, and sanmi, which they describe as acidity. Now recently, in the sake world, they've been starting to describe more and more sakes as umami, which is kind of like a savouriness or meatiness. Almost like, you know when you eat a mushroom and you go, oh yeah, that mushroom's got like some meaty flavour to it. It's not actual meat, it doesn't actually taste like meat, but you know what I mean, it's got that savouriness to it. That's how they describe umami. And it's something that's coming in a little bit more to the cocktail scene now, and more spirits are kind of taking advantage of that extra dimension that they can go into. Now, these are the basic categories that will quantify the sake, and a good quality sake will usually have like a well-balanced mix of all of these, so that they're not too dominant in one area and unpleasant to drink. Now, shoju and aramori is also popular in Japan, and I will touch on it quickly because when I was coming up with this list, I was debating on whether I put sake or whether I put shoju in for Japan. Now, both of them were obviously very, very iconic and very much Japanese beverages. However, I didn't feel right that I could put in sake and then not touch on shoju. So there you go. Japan has 2. Apologies. There you go. Firstly, it's not the same as soju from Korea. Shoju is a distilled spirit with different flavors coming from what it is distilled from. It's usually sweet potato, barley, rice, brown sugar. And I will just quickly break down the differences between them real quick so you're able to understand it a little better and kind of tell the difference in between the two. So sweet potato shoju is aromatic but quite varied. It typically has like fruit notes of lychee and peach with like floral notes of lavender or roses. Then you've got rice shoju, which is a little bit more light, a little bit of hints of green apple, citrus, melon, but also keeps like a little bit of a savory flavour of the rice. Then you've got barley shoju, which tends to have a richness, like a flavour that's reminiscent of a lightly aged whiskey or rum, but with some light fruity notes behind it. Brown sugar shoju has a light green aroma. So think leaves, think green apples, think freshly mown grass, think sugar cane. It's a really cool aroma, and it's almost similar to that of like unaged cachaça or white rums, as it's kind of made from similar thing. White rum being made from molasses, cachaça being made from pressed sugarcane juice, and brown sugar shoju being made from brown sugar. And finally, you've got awamori, which is made from Thailand long grain rice. It's moderate in flavour and character, but it's like a very good like middle ground of flavour and aroma. Now, before moving on to South Korea's soju, I'm going to mention Pyongyang soju. Now, that is the national alcohol of North Korea, and it's an alcohol that I didn't actually know existed before I did the research for this episode. Turns out it's an alcohol that can be rarely found in the US, but is a genuine exported alcohol from the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Apparently imported by a North Korean national living in Manhattan that's got arrested for lying to the FBI in 2007, allegedly. That aside, Pyongyang soju is a cheap version of the South Korean soju that apparently tastes as cheap as it is. However, I have seen a review somewhere saying that one soju expert or person who drinks soju regularly drank it and said, "God, it's so good. I can't believe how cheap it is." So take that with a pinch of salt. And also the fact that by buying Pyongyang soju, you are funding the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. However, you do what you want. Now, traditional soju is a Korean drink that varies in alcohol percentage from about 13 to about 50%. So that's 13 to 50. Although soju around and under the 20% ABV level is the most popular at the moment. It's made from fermented grains, e.g. wheat, barley, rice, even sometimes sweet potato and corn. Now, more mass-produced soju tends to be made with cheaper ingredients, and then they mix it together with a load of artificial sweeteners just to mask the flavour of the cheap soju that they're producing. However, when you get into specialist soju, the type of grain used to ferment it can really affect the flavour and aromas you experienced. So similar to how we saw with baijiu, how the type of yeast that you use, even though it's being fermented from the same thing, can really affect the aromas to it. You can imagine if you change what you're distilling, you can actually get quite a lot of profound differences. So, for example, if we look at golden barley soju, you can have more like stone fruit aromas and like a slight savouriness behind it. If you have rice-based soju, it's often a bit lighter, a little bit sweeter. I would probably describe it as a really light version of whiskey. It's easy, it's drinkable, and it's just like an all-round kind of pleaser, easy to go down. Now, Koreans typically drink soju in shot glasses. They either down it or they sip it. And commonly the shot is dropped in beer to make a somaik. God, my pronunciation's horrible. This usually works quite good with a light lager that doesn't have any overly strong flavours in it. You want a light lager that will be amplified by the fact that you're adding a shot of soju to it, as opposed to just, I want to get fucked up and I don't want to taste it at all. So you choose a really strong beer, put a shot of alcohol in it, and then just down it. So there are a lot of videos online how to drink soju like a Korean. Would recommend watching it if you're interested. I was also watching a video last night on how they make Pyongyang soju. So if you're interested, give it a little Google, look it up on YouTube, find the video, and you'll notice it's the same factory that's producing it, and it's just a foodstuffs warehouse. So take great joy in watching that. But there you go. That is a cursory description of the national drinks of East Asia. Again, I'm making a bit of a series out of this, so feel free to stay tuned and listen to the other episodes that come out on these topics. I will see you in the next one. Cheers, bye-bye.